The monsters in Beast Wrestler have 3 different stats: power points, life points, and speed points. In this video, I'll be going over how these stats work, the secrets behind them, and how you can utilize these secrets in battle. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now it's safe to assume that you have some idea of how this game works, and if you don't, you can always check my long play in the description where I mention the controls and how the gameplay works in the intro. So to the left is the game itself, I have it paused at the minute, and to the top right you'll see all of this stuff. What's going on here? Well, this is actually certain addresses of the RAM from the game. The 2 numbers up here is player 1's power points and life points, and these are in real time, so when player 1 gets hit, you will see like his life points go down. These 2 numbers here are player 2's life points, so 500 power points for player 2 and 700 life points. And the last 3 numbers are pretty much the stats of the beast itself, like just the base stats of player 1. But I'll probably show the base stats for both monsters in the bottom right of the screen. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the first stat, which is power points. And I should mention that I will be going over speed points mainly because it's self-explanatory and there isn't much behind it other than it just affects how fast you move across the stage. The power stat affects how strong your strikes and grabs are. It does not affect how strong your super is, and I'll get into that in a bit. But there is one very important fact about how strikes work. So I'm going to hit Ominos and I want you to pay close attention to the 4 numbers on the top. So player 1's stats and player 2's stats. So I'm going to hit him and then immediately pause the emulation. As you can see there, I did a tail swipe and it dealt 15 damage to Ominos because he had 700 and now he has 685. But it also lowered his power points and it lowered my own life. You see, the thing is, strikes also deal damage to yourself, and no matter who you're using, it's always in increments of 5. And you can also notice that every second you do regain 1 health point, which goes the same for the opponent as well. So yeah, every time you land a strike, you deal 5 damage to yourself. Now there is a threshold to this, so I'm going to keep striking here for a bit, and when I get to around 35, that's when this stops happening. So yeah, around 30. So there is a limit, which means that you can't actually KO yourself by using strikes against the opponent. It won't go lower until it hits 35, and then that's when it will stop again. Now of course this does explain a few aspects when I was playing through this game like in the past, where I was landing a bunch of strikes and all of a sudden the opponent did 1 super and I got KO'd, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I had all of these health points, like what's going on? Well, simply put, strikes hurt you. And so there's certain grabs, so let me get into the grabs. Now I'm going to load the save state again. Some grabs only deal damage to the second player, so I'm going to grab him right here. That is the grab done by pressing A, and you can tell that it did 40 points to their power points and about 80 points to their life points. Now if I do a different grab, which is a body slam done by pressing B, it acts similar to the strike, in which it did damage to the opponent's PP and LP, but I also did damage to myself, which was 5 points. Now I should mention that there are some grabs that flat out don't work, so I'm going to deal damage to Ominos until he doesn't, takes a while to get back up. I would use a slam, but he usually gets back up fast. Now Airhole has 2 grabs on the ground. If he does down A while on the opponent's on the ground, he will strangle them like that. That does deal damage to their power points and their life points. There we go, and I think it did damage to Airhole himself as well. But if I do his other grab, which is done by pressing up and A, watch the numbers, it did nothing. I'm going to do that again just to prove a point. Up and A, it deals no damage. So that alone should show you how kind of flawed this game is, but there's much more to it than that. We're just getting started. Another interesting part about this game is that it has a gut system. Now there are some fighting games out there that have this as well. I wouldn't call this like new or anything, but the way it works is that you take less and less damage the lower your health is. So pay attention to Airhole's health. You can see that's at 100 right now. Now when Ominos uses his tail swipe, it goes down by 15. And if I keep using it, you can see that the damage is getting lower and lower. Like now I'm doing like 5 damage, 3 damage. At this, sooner or later I'm going to only do like 1 damage. Like I'm only doing 1 and 2 damage here. So the way you KO the opponent is by getting their life points like under 10, which is kind of hard to do because as you can see, not only is your damage getting lower, but they're also regaining a life point per second, so you have to be quick about this. And as you can tell from there, after you get KO'd, you do regain some of your health back. Now, I'm not sure how it works exactly, like, sometimes you might gain like 30 points back, maybe you gain like maybe 100 or 200, it seems to be a bit random, I'm not entirely sure. But the point is, you do regain some kind of health back. Unfortunately, you can't see your health in real time when you're playing this game, so it kind of makes it a bit difficult to tell how close the opponent is to being KO'd. Now there's one last fact I need to mention, and that is how supers work and how the PP works when it goes under 0. So as you can tell, when you get hit, your power points go down. That's self-explanatory. That means I'm doing less and less per hit. So I think if I tail swipe Aminos, I'm still doing 15, but I think if I was using someone stronger, like maybe someone with like 500 power points, and they got to around air hose power points, I'd probably be doing like 10 to 15 with that character. But there's a very important fact about power points. Now, I should mention supers, but before I do that, I'm going to lower air hose power to, let's leave it right there at 3. Now, air hose super, not only does it deal damage to his own life, but it also deals damage to his own power points. And you can see right now he's at 3 power points, so if I do his super right now, what is this? What's going on here? All of a sudden we have a huge value. Now I could be wrong, I don't know the specifics, but right now Airhole has negative power points. So do you remember how he was dealing 15 with his tail swipe? Well, now you can see that Aminos is at 572. I'm going to actually poke this address and put his life back to max. If I hit Aminos with the tail swipe, I'm doing 105. I'm doing a lot of damage per hit now. I am now at what is debatably the highest attack power in the game. And of course, thanks to the gut system, it does get lower and lower as Aminos' health gets lower. So what that means is, it is more than possible to get your power points so low that your attack skyrockets. Now, is this practical in the real run? Like, is this practical when playing like a match against the CPU? Like, I mean, you can't see the values when you're like playing it on the cartridge. Yes and no. Obviously, you can't tell, but there's a secret to the stat. Now, as you see from earlier, if you get hit, you lose some power points. You can see that Airhole lost 7 points right there. And just to show it again, yeah, he lost 7 power points. How much power points do you lose? Depends on how much life you have. It actually scales. So what I'm going to do is poke Airhole's base stats and set it to, let's say 700, right? And now you can see that his life bar is trying to take up to the maximum. Let's just poke that immediately and set it to max life. And you can see that Airhole's power stat is still the same, it's at 80. But now that Airhole has more health, if he gets hit, you can see that like he's losing power really fast. It's always going by 7, like he's already at negative, he didn't even have to use a super. The reason is because, again, power points also scale depending on your health. So you see, like if Airhole's at low health, you can see that he's losing less and less power points because his health is low. So your power points also have a gut system, but it's specifically tied to your life points, which is insane. Because what this debatably means, I haven't got to test this out yet, is you can do a run of this game and make a build where you specifically focus on increasing your health. And because your health is so high, even though you're gonna take plenty of hits, not only will it be hard for the opponent to KO you, but you will unknowingly and eventually be at negative power, which will make your attacks deal a ton of damage. So that is insane. I think I said a lot about the power stat, so let's go into the life stat. So as explained earlier, when your life is under max, it does regen by 1 per second. Now, there really isn't much to talk about in terms of health, Like I already mentioned that when you get to around 10 or less health, you get KO'd, and if you mash the buttons, you might be able to recover. But for example, if I use a super against Airhole, unfortunately, Omnos doesn't have a strong super. I'm just going to set his life to, let's set it to 65, just for an example. So if I do Airhole super, I'll do 40 damage, right? And it actually did a bit more. It might be a bit more when they have lower HP, but you can see that it did KO Omnos. And if it was even lower, it would actually put Omnos' life to 0, which means like there's no chance of them getting up because like you did your super and it just set their life to 0. That's self-explanatory. But I might have mentioned earlier that certain supers lower your own hit points. Now, if you remembered earlier, when our power points go to negative, it gave us the highest damage possible. We went from doing 15 damage with our tail attacks to over 105 on the first hit. What happens when our life reaches negative? Well, let's find out. Now I'm telling you right now, it's about to get really insane, so pay close attention because this shit is insane. Now before I show what happens when your health reaches -1 or lower, I need to explain player 2 versus player 1. So you can see on the numbers to the right, Federico has 280 power and 250 life points. If he does his super and it lands, it deals 20 power points to himself and 40 life points to himself. It only says 11 because he regained 1 health per second. So 40 life points, 20 power points. That seems normal, right? However, if I load my other save state, in which Federico is now player 1, it's a bit different. You can see right here, power points 280, power points 250, same thing as usual. If I do his super and it lands on the player 1 side, it deals fixed damage instead. Or I shouldn't say fixed damage, it deals scaling damage. Now what that means is simple. If I lower Federico's health to, let's say, 30, while he's on the player 1 side, and it lands, you can see that it barely did anything to him, because his health is already very low. Which sounds normal, right? It's kind of like strikes, where you, I should say when you get hit, where you take less and less damage the more the opponent lowers their health. But what happens when you deal fixed damage to yourself on the player 2 side? Let's find out. I'm going to set his life to 40, or let's do 30, and I'm going to land a super. All of a sudden, I'm in the negative. Because for some reason, now I haven't tested every character, so I can't say for sure if it's specifically player 2 or specifically Federico in player 2. When his super lands on the player 2 side, it deals fixed damage. It doesn't matter how low your life is, it will always deal the same amount to himself. So now he's in negative health, and which is relatively easy for Federico to do, because when even on the player 1 side, when Federico hits the opponent, he's constantly doing damage to himself. You can see that his life bar is getting like low because it deals 5 per hit, and like his attacks are really fast in this game. So it's pretty realistic for Federico to get low health, and that's on top of the fact that Federico also has to deal with the opponents he's facing. For example, like Uvolos, whatever side he's on, when he does his super, it deals a ton of damage. It's at 210 there, and it even knocked out Federico. Which does make me believe that I think supers knock out earlier compared to like strikes and grabs, because with strikes and grabs they have to be around like 10 or something for it to knock out. But with supers, they don't even have to be that low. It just depends if their health is low enough and it would just work. And I should mention that if Federico has very low health, like if I said it's like 100 or something, and Uvolos does the super, it will go to 0. It won't go to negative. But back on the topic of negative HP. So player 2 Federico, you know, he's low on health, he's been like getting hit or dealing hits, and he does his super, right? Now the thing is, while you're at negative health, because the number is high, you start dealing 5 damage to yourself, even though you're in the negative. Remember, when your health is very low, you don't do damage to yourself anymore. But since it's technically in the negative, now we're back to dealing damage to ourselves. So, this is the part where I tell you, oh, negative health, Federico is an unstoppable zombie where you can't KO him anymore. the world is doomed, Federico is undeniably the best monster in the game. I still think he is the best monster in the game, but Zombie Federico, not so much. Here's what happens if I kick him. I should say tail whip. That's right, he is a glass. He's literally made of glass. And you might think it ends there, but he was supposed to gain health, but now it's going the other way, or at least supposedly it's like still going in the negative. It's going backwards, but he's still under 0, so you know what that means if I hit him again. Why, he's still down, by the way. He gets KO'd again, and there is nothing the opponent can do about this. And just for good measure, I'm going to even do the super, which actually resets Federico back to 0. So yeah, player 2 side is kind of dangerous, especially for Federico, because you deal fixed damage to yourself. Now let's think about this. I'm going to load a save state from when I was playing this against the CPU. So you can see that Federico's health is already low. This is a save state from when I was playing this game on my own. And I use the usual strat, which is to hit him with like 5 tail swipes as you're backing up. So I'm actually going to try to pull off the negative life I mentioned earlier by lowering his health. Realistically, what I should be doing is waiting for him to get up instead of forcing him to get up with his tail swipes. But it's fine. Now he just needs to do his super. He's at negative health. Now the headbutts, it's keeping him at the negative health. So from here, all I have to do is land 1 hit, which is gonna happen. There we go. So you can use this as a speedrun tactic, because now Federico is free. All I have to do is tail swipe him one more time and the fight is over. Because remember, the computer is on the second player side, so they get affected by this fixed damage nonsense. Now again, I should mention the reason why it's debatably usable is because, again, like, obviously when you're playing this game, you're not going to be able to see the PowerPoint values or the life values. So this is obviously something you'd have to like practice and like count the number of hits it takes for them to like get into the threshold and then like bait them into using their super, so that actually like puts them in the negative zone. And another issue is that you also have to consider the fact that strikes lower your health. So unless you're going for a full life build, which can actually help if you're like, it can help with letting you reach the maximum PP by taking hits, which could technically be slower in a sense. It is a bit like risky because you can die from trying to get their HP low, since you're lowering your own as well. But yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say about the stats. This game is freaking insane. I never thought I'd like figure this out in years, because I've always felt like I've mastered this game, but I didn't know about this stuff. I didn't know that you actually lower your health per hit. I didn't know that you can reach the negative power, the negative health. And like negative power gives you mad damage, and negative health makes you like die to 1 hit. Like all of this stuff is insane, yo. And yeah, I do have to test this more maybe. Perhaps like it's really just player 2 that deals fixed damage to themselves, so when it comes to the supers. But wow, what a game. I don't know what to say about this. I hope you learned something new from this. I was very shocked when I figured this out myself. I just figured, okay, maybe turn on Biz so I can see how health works in this game. I'm very curious, and the results were indeed shocking for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a good day.